Hello, you're watching Life Diary. My name is Makai Liu, and today we have a real-life story about expectations, fear, honesty, and the courage to speak when it feels easiest to stay silent. If you enjoy true stories that feel like real life, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us until the end. They both believed their first date would be perfect, because online, everything already felt right. But in real life, the evening ended with awkward silence and a polite goodbye. That same night, she sent him a message she couldn't say face to face, a message that revealed pain, fear, and a past he never expected. And from that moment, one honest sentence began a story that would test trust, courage, and the meaning of real love. Hello, dear viewer. My name is Dennis. I am 34 years old. I live in a large city where life moves fast and silence is rare. I am a businessman. Most of my days are spent in meetings, calls, numbers, and decisions. People often think that means confidence comes easily to me, but that is not always true, especially when it comes to personal things. When I met Eva online, I honestly thought this would be different. She is 30. She works as an accountant. Calm, thoughtful, attentive. From the first messages, our conversations felt deep and natural. We talked for hours, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning before work. We shared small details about our days, our habits, what tired us, what we missed in life. Very quickly, we both started to believe that our first date would be something special. Not just another meeting, not just coffee. We talked about it in advance, almost planned it emotionally. Maybe too much. I imagined how easily we would talk in real life, just like online. She imagined the same. We both put a lot of hope into that evening. When the day finally came, I arrived early. I chose a quiet place, nothing fancy, somewhere you could actually talk. When Eva walked in, I recognized her immediately. She looked exactly like in her photos, but also different. More real, more fragile somehow. We smiled. We said hello. And almost immediately, something felt wrong. Not bad, not dramatic, just tense. We sat down, ordered coffee, and started talking. At least, we tried. Our words were polite. Careful. Too careful. We talked about work, about traffic, about the weather. Topics that mean nothing. Topics people use when they are afraid to touch something real. There were pauses. Long ones. I caught myself thinking too much about what to say next instead of actually listening. She avoided eye contact, then suddenly looked straight at me, then looked away again. I could feel how much this date mattered to her. And because it mattered so much, it became heavy. At some point, I realized that online we were brave. In person, we were both scared. I tried to joke. She smiled politely. She tried to explain something about her job, then stopped halfway, as if she wasn't sure it was interesting enough. The more we tried, the worse it felt. Like forcing a conversation that should have come naturally. Inside, I felt disappointed. Not in her. In the situation. I kept thinking, maybe we created an image of each other that real life couldn't match. After about an hour, we both knew the date was ending. No one said it directly. It just happened. We stood outside, said a polite goodbye. No hug. No touch. No plans for next time. She said, "It was nice to meet you." I said the same. And that was it. On my way home, I kept replaying the evening in my head. I told myself that not every connection works offline. That sometimes people are simply better as conversations on a screen. I almost convinced myself that this was one of those cases. That night, I put my phone on the table and tried to focus on work emails. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from Eva. At first, I didn't open it. I hesitated. I already assumed I knew what it would say. But when I finally read the first line, I realized I was wrong. I stared at the phone longer than I want to admit. The message preview was longer than a usual polite follow-up. That alone made my chest tighten. I sat down, put the phone on the table, then picked it up again. For a moment, I thought about leaving it unread until morning. That felt safer. But I opened it. Eva wrote slowly, carefully, as if she had rewritten the message many times before sending it. She said she couldn't say this in person. That the words stayed stuck in her throat when we were sitting across from each other. That she didn't want me to misunderstand her silence. She wrote about her last relationship. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just honestly. She said she had spent years with a man who constantly reminded her that she wasn't enough. That her job was boring. That her opinions were unnecessary. That her feelings were inconvenient. She wrote that every time she tried to talk about something serious, He made her feel childish for wanting reassurance. She said he never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His calm tone was worse. It made her doubt herself, made her apologize for things she didn't do, made her feel lucky that he stayed at all. As I read, I noticed my jaw tightening. Eva wrote that over time, she learned to be quiet, to observe, to wait, to adapt. She stopped trusting her instincts. She stopped believing someone could care without conditions. She stayed because she was afraid that being alone would feel even worse than being slowly erased. She admitted that when we met in person, all of that came back. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of being judged, the fear of needing something from someone again. She said she liked me. That was clear in her words. But liking someone meant vulnerability, and vulnerability had a price in her past. At the end of the message, she wrote that she understood if I didn't want to continue, that she just needed me to know the truth, not to explain herself, not to ask for pity, just to be honest. I finished reading and put the phone down. The room felt quiet in a different way now. Heavy, focused. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt still. Part of me wanted to reply immediately, to say something reassuring, to fix the situation. That instinct comes easily to me in business. Problems appear, solutions follow. But this wasn't a problem to solve. This was a person trusting me with something fragile. So I didn't answer. I needed time. Real time. Not avoidance. Reflection. I went for a walk even though it was late. The city looked different at night. Less noise. Fewer distractions. I replayed the date in my head again, but now through a different lens. Her pauses made sense now. Her careful words. Her distant look. It wasn't disinterest. It was fear. I asked myself an uncomfortable question. Was I ready to deal with that? Being with someone like Eva wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, awareness, responsibility, not just gestures, but consistency. I knew myself well enough to admit that I usually avoid emotional complexity. Work has always been simpler. Numbers behave. People don't. I also asked myself something else. Did I want to walk away simply because it would be easier? That question stayed with me. The next day, I still didn't reply. I went to work, attended meetings, spoke confidently, made decisions. On the surface, nothing changed. Inside, something did. That evening, I read her message again. Slower this time. I paid attention not just to what she wrote, but how she wrote it. There was no manipulation, no drama, no demand, just honesty, carefully placed into sentences. I respected that. Instead of sending a long emotional reply, I wrote something simple. I told her I needed a little time to think, that her message mattered to me, that I appreciated her honesty. She replied quickly. She said she understood. 2 days passed. In those 2 days, I noticed something unexpected. I missed her. Not the idea of her, but the possibility. The chance that something real could grow if handled carefully. On the 3rd day, I asked her to meet again. Not for a date. Not for romance. Just to talk. She agreed. When we met the 2nd time, everything felt different. There was no pressure to impress. No expectations to perform. We walked side by side, not across from each other. That alone changed the dynamic. We spoke slowly. Sometimes we stopped talking at all. And that silence didn't feel threatening anymore. Eva told me more about her past, but this time with less fear. I listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything. I told her that I appreciated her courage, even if it didn't feel like courage to her. I also told her about myself, about how control helps me feel safe, about how I hide uncertainty behind structure and planning, about how emotional risk is not my strength. There was relief in saying that out loud. We didn't promise anything. We didn't label anything. We agreed on one thing only. To try. Slowly. Honestly. Without pretending to be braver than we were. When we said goodbye that day, it wasn't polite. It was calm. And for the first time since we met, I felt that this story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. After that 2nd meeting, nothing dramatic happened. And that was exactly what made it different. We didn't suddenly start texting all day. We didn't rush into emotions or big words. There was no explosion of passion, no cinematic moment. Instead, there was rhythm. We met again a few days later. Then again. Sometimes just for a walk. Sometimes for dinner after work. Sometimes simply to sit somewhere quiet and talk about nothing important. And slowly, without any clear decision, these meetings became part of our lives. I noticed how Eva relaxed with time. Her shoulders were no longer tense when she spoke. She stopped apologizing for pauses in conversation. She laughed more freely, not loudly, but honestly. I also noticed changes in myself. I stopped checking my phone during meetings with her. I stopped thinking ahead, planning the next move, analyzing outcomes. When I was with her, I was present. That was unusual for me. We talked about small things at first. Food habits, childhood memories, work frustrations. Then, gradually, deeper topics appeared without warning. One evening, while we were sitting in her kitchen drinking tea, she told me that living alone still felt strange to her. Not lonely, but unfamiliar. She said she was learning how to take up space again, how to make decisions without asking permission, how to trust her own reactions. I listened and realized something important. She wasn't broken. She was rebuilding. That required patience. Not saving. Not fixing. Just being there. Weeks passed. At some point, it became normal that I stayed over. At some point, it became normal that we planned weekends together. At some point, without a formal conversation, we understood that we were together. Love didn't arrive loudly. It settled quietly. We moved in together after a few months. Not because it was romantic, but because it was practical. My apartment was closer to her work. We were already spending most nights together. It felt natural. Living together showed sides of each other that dates never reveal. Eva liked order, but not control. She needed predictability, not rules. She woke up early even on weekends. She hated raised voices, even joking ones. Sometimes she needed silence, not because she was angry, but because noise overwhelmed her. I learned to notice these things. Not perfectly, but sincerely. She learned things about me too. That I worked too much when stressed. That I avoided conflict by changing topics. That I needed time alone to think before responding emotionally. We talked. Often. Not dramatically. Calmly. For the first time in my life, conversations about feelings didn't feel like negotiations. They felt like cooperation. For Eva, happiness looked simple. Shared breakfasts. Evenings without tension. Knowing she wouldn't be criticized for being herself. For me, happiness looked different than I expected. Stability without boredom. Connection without pressure. Trust without performance. And then, just as things settled into something solid, the past reached out. It happened on an ordinary evening. Eva was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when she suddenly went quiet. Too quiet. I noticed immediately. She didn't hide the screen. She didn't turn away. She just froze. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, then handed me the phone. It was a message from her ex. He wrote that he missed her, that he had been thinking about her constantly, that losing her made him realize how much he loved her. He said he had changed. He said he was ready to fight for her. He said she was making a mistake. I looked at Eva. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking slightly. She told me that he used to write like this when he felt he was losing control, that these messages always came with promises. That before, she believed them. She said she was scared, not confused, not tempted, scared. That distinction mattered. She wasn't considering going back. She was afraid of what he might do next, of how persistent he could be, of how easily he could pull her back into old patterns. She told me she didn't want to hide this from me. She wanted me to know everything. I felt anger, but I didn't let it lead. This wasn't about my pride. It was about her safety and peace. I told her she did the right thing by telling me. I told her she wasn't weak for feeling afraid. I told her she wasn't facing this alone anymore. We decided together what to do. I contacted him directly, calmly, clearly, without threats. I told him to stop contacting Eva. I told him that she had moved on. I told him that any further attempts would be treated seriously. There was no emotional argument. No debate. Just boundaries. The messages stopped. Eva didn't sleep well for a few nights. I stayed close. Not watching, not guarding. Just present. Gradually, the tension left her body. Her breathing changed. Her laughter returned. Life went back to normal. But not the old normal. A stronger one. We continued building our life together. Not perfectly, but consciously. We chose each other every day, not because it was easy, but because it was real. And for the first time, both of us felt that the past no longer had power over the future. After the messages stopped, life didn't suddenly become perfect. It became quieter. And that quiet mattered more than anything else. For Eva, the absence of fear felt unfamiliar. She didn't say it directly, but I could see it in small things. The way she checked her phone less often. The way her shoulders slowly relaxed when evenings came. The way she stopped expecting something bad to happen just because things were calm. We settled into routines without discussing them. Mornings were simple. Coffee. A few quiet minutes before work. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Silence stopped being uncomfortable. It became a sign of trust. Evenings were slower. We cooked together, often without music or television. Eva liked hearing the normal sounds of the apartment. Dishes, water, footsteps. She once told me that noise used to make her nervous because it often meant someone was angry. Here, noise meant nothing dangerous. That realization stayed with her. Living together revealed emotional habits that dates never show. Eva struggled with asking for things, even small ones. If she needed help, she hesitated, measuring whether it was acceptable to need someone. When I noticed this, I didn't push. I simply responded every time she did ask. Calmly, without judgment. Consistency mattered more than words. I had my own challenges. When stress at work increased, I withdrew emotionally. Not intentionally. It was automatic. Eva noticed it immediately. Instead of accusing me, she asked questions. She wanted to understand, not control. That was new for me. We learned each other's patterns slowly, without pretending to be better than we were. Love, in this phase, looked practical. Shared responsibilities. Mutual respect. The absence of fear. Months passed. Friends noticed changes in both of us. Eva smiled more openly. I listened more than I spoke. We didn't talk about the future in grand terms. We didn't need to. The present felt stable enough. Then, gradually, Eva began to talk about things she had never spoken about before. She told me about moments in her past relationship that still haunted her. Not dramatic events. Ordinary ones. Being ignored after expressing feelings. Being told she was too sensitive. Being made to feel replaceable. She explained that trauma doesn't always come from violence. Sometimes it comes from being slowly convinced that you don't matter. I listened without interrupting. I didn't offer solutions. I didn't try to minimize it. I simply acknowledged it. That, she later told me, was something she had never experienced before. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this peace could last. That belief made her vulnerable. One evening, while we were cooking dinner, her phone vibrated again. This time, she didn't freeze. She looked at the screen, took a breath, and handed it to me. It was another message from her ex. Shorter, less emotional, more manipulative. He wrote that he knew she was afraid of him, that it hurt him to be seen that way, that he only wanted to talk one last time, that she owed him closure. Eva's hands were steady, but her voice wasn't. She said she felt guilty, not because she wanted him back, but because she had been trained to feel responsible for his emotions. She said part of her still believed that saying no made her a bad person. That sentence stayed with me. I told her something she needed to hear clearly. She didn't know anyone access to her life. Not explanations. Not closure. Not forgiveness. We discussed options calmly. Blocking him completely. Documenting messages. Setting firm boundaries again. Eva decided to send one final message herself. Not emotional. Not defensive. Clear. She wrote that she had moved on. That she was happy. That she didn't want further contact. That this decision wasn't open for discussion. She blocked him immediately after. The act itself was small. The meaning was enormous. That night, Eva cried. Not loudly. Quietly. From exhaustion, not sadness. She said she felt like she had finally chosen herself. I stayed with her. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. The days that followed were emotionally heavy but strangely empowering for her. Each morning, she woke up without checking her phone first. Each evening, she fell asleep faster. Life resumed its calm rhythm. We began making plans without fear. Small ones. A weekend trip. Rearranging the apartment. Talking about future goals without pressure. For the first time, Eva spoke about happiness as something stable, not temporary. She told me that love used to feel like tension. Now it felt like safety. For me, something shifted as well. I realized that strength wasn't about control or independence. It was about showing up consistently, even when nothing dramatic was happening. We weren't building something exciting. We were building something durable. And that mattered more than either of us had expected. After Eva blocked him, nothing dramatic followed. No surprise messages. No unexpected appearances. Just silence. At first, she waited for something to happen. Fear doesn't disappear instantly. It checks if it is safe to leave. Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing happened. Slowly, Eva stopped looking over her shoulder. She stopped expecting her past to knock on the door. The tension that had lived in her body for years faded little by little. Not magically. Naturally. Our life continued. Work days were busy. Evenings were calm. We argued sometimes, like normal people do, about dishes, about schedules, about small misunderstandings. But those arguments never turned into something dangerous. No one raised their voice. No one attacked the other's worth. We learned how to disagree without fear. That was new for both of us. One evening, Eva told me something that stayed with me. She said that for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to earn love. She wasn't adjusting herself to be more convenient. She was simply being herself, and it was enough. I realized then that this was the real ending of her old story. Not when she left her ex. Not when she blocked him. But when she stopped believing that love had to hurt. We started planning the future, not as an escape, but as a continuation. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. We talked about work changes. About saving money. About what kind of life we wanted, not what looked right from the outside. We agreed that stability mattered more than appearances. One weekend, we visited her parents. Another quiet milestone. There were no speeches. Just dinner, conversations, observation. Her mother watched us closely, then smiled in a way that said more than words. Eva noticed it too. On the way home, she said she felt seen. Not judged. Seen. Months later, we moved to a new apartment together. Slightly bigger. More light. A place that felt intentionally chosen, not just convenient. We unpacked boxes slowly, laughing at how much unnecessary stuff we had accumulated. It felt symbolic. Keeping what mattered. Letting go of the rest. Life didn't become perfect, but it became honest. Eva grew more confident. She spoke up at work. She set boundaries without apologizing. She stopped explaining herself when no explanation was needed. I changed too. I stopped hiding behind work when emotions appeared. I learned that being reliable meant more than being impressive. That showing up consistently mattered more than grand gestures. We built trust through repetition. Through ordinary days. Through calm evenings. 1 year after our first awkward date, we returned to the same place where we had said that polite, distant goodbye. We didn't plan it as an anniversary. It just happened naturally. We sat there, remembering how tense we had been. How much pressure we put on that first meeting. How little we understood back then. Eva smiled and said that if she hadn't sent that message, none of this would exist. That she almost didn't send it. Fear nearly won. I told her that if she hadn't sent it, I would have walked away thinking the story simply didn't work. That sometimes one honest sentence changes everything. That night, we didn't talk about destiny or fate. We talked about choice. She chose to be honest instead of silent. I chose to listen instead of retreat. We both chose to try instead of protecting ourselves. The story didn't end with fireworks. It ended with certainty. We stayed together. We built a life. We chose peace over fear. And that choice changed everything. This story reminds us that sometimes the most important words are the ones we're afraid to say out loud. One honest message can change a life, or give it a second chance. What do you think about this story? Would you have taken the risk to be honest after a failed first date? Or would you have walked away? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to read them.